Hi, my name is Melvin. Welcome to my YouTube channel. This is season 2 of Growing California Poppies from seeds. It's 2024 February, day 75. So it takes 2.5 months to grow this big. This is several plants here, not just one. And the reason for that is because these come from very small seeds. So I introduced the seeds, the brand of seed packet and all that in the previous year in season 1, so there's no need to go over that. In fact, I'm a little hazy on the exact date of which I sowed the seeds, but I'm pretty sure it was December 10th, 2023. So this is still in March, well, 1 month later, so day 101 in 2024, and as you can see, there's a lot more growth, but some of the leaves are yellowing. The tips look a little bit blackened. There's supposed to be a slight pinkish tinge. It's a very interesting plant. As you can see there in the center left of the screen, you can see that's what the leaf tips are supposed to look like. So there are some leaves here that are diseased. You can see there's a flower bud. This stem to a flower is called the peduncle. So this is the first blossom of my 2024 season 2. And it's a beautiful one. I don't think it's quite as big as the one that I got, I think it was already by late spring or summer of last year. That one was a whopper. But this one is something that just really uplifted my mood in March. And yeah, I post about this kind of stuff on social media, but you know, my first blossom, etc. So it's a really beautiful flower. And I do have California assorted wildflower packet that I think has like 19 species of wildflowers that I'm testing. So that will probably be another series, but I'm putting them all in the same pot because I don't have that much room and it's really overcrowded. I just want to see what happens and if any of those flowers capture my fancy. But so far, none of them can compare to California poppy. So this is still in March 2024, day 107. So what I noticed was we had a very cold first few months in 2024, and before the sun hits these petals, they don't have that much turgor pressure in them. It takes it until about 2 p.m. Pacific time for these to gain full turgor pressure. So this is actually a fairly large bloom, but I don't like seeing them like this. It wasn't a problem later. It was only a problem in the very beginning, and I think that's because perhaps the root system wasn't well developed enough, and you know, there just wasn't enough turgor pressure, maybe. So you'll see instances where petals are like this, but yeah, this flower is getting a little bit old. The petals are a little dog-eared, and this one seems pretty fresh still. So you can see in the background there's a flower that's already been shed. I think that was the first mover, and some more flower buds coming along the way. So some of them come out a little bit wrinkled. That's nothing actually to be alarmed about. As I remarked in season 1, I was worried that this was due to my growing conditions. Maybe not, because I've seen this in the wild too. So the edges of the petals, the 4 petals, can be a little ruffled, and if I'm seeing that in the middle of nowhere in a place like Lake Elsinore in 2019, then during the super bloom, then it's a feature, not a bug. So you could see the anatomy of the flower in there. It's really beautiful, and bumblebees love this, as I'll show later on. So I have a bunch of flowers on the way, and I also have a backup pot that I sowed seeds in that I'll show you. But yeah, so far this plant, well, these plants, there's several of them, have gotten off to a decent start. The foliage on top looks very healthy, but there are some clumps of leaves that are yellow and sort of mottled with blackish specks. So they're diseased, probably some kind of fungus. So California poppy flowers are in their prime for the first 3 days, and by day 5 deterioration is apparent. And with Southern California being very windy, I often have to sort of adjust these if they're bent in different directions before I take some pictures or take some footage. But that wasn't the case later on when things warmed up and I changed the nutrition regimen a little bit. So this is still in March, but it's day 110. It was early on in my personal California poppy season, so I was very, very excited, and I would open the blinds every day and just take a look from a distance, from the second floor, from the first floor, and marvel at the beauty. Unfortunately, the flowers tended to point away from my windows, which is where the sun's facing, but the view from the second floor is spectacular. And this is what the flowers look like when you're approaching days 3 to 5. So this is in the backup pot. You'll notice some of those edges were ruffled. Same here. So up until this point, I was fertilizing with just Miracle-Gro all-purpose plant food plus some crushed vitamins. But later on, I'll show you an additional ingredient that I added that seems to have changed things up for the better. So far at this point, late March, we have 5 amazing blooms going on at once. And then in April, this is day 115. You can see the healthy foliage has grown really tall. And this is already taller than pretty much anything you would see in the wild. Super blooms don't last for very long, typically about 2 to 3 weeks. So the first 2 flowers from this bigger plant in the backup planter look a little bit dog-eared, very rough. So yeah, I don't think this environment with this round planter that I was going to throw away anyway, but decided to keep around for flowers, but not for one of my fruit trees or other new plant series. So I decided to sow some seeds in here, and these pots don't have internal reservoirs like these giant cubic planters do. So I figure the environment for growing, number one, there's just not as much soil there, and number two, it dries out pretty quickly, especially when it gets warmer, which is going to be very detrimental for poppy growth. But I just wanted some extra flowers. That's why I planted in that older circular, it's not really cylindrical, it's very narrow at the bottom planter. So you can see more of what I'm talking about. The turgor pressure is not there, but that issue seems to have gone away as the plants matured and started adding some different components to my fertilizer mix. But so far so good. The plants don't look quite as robust as in season 1, that first mover that I got, but nonetheless, it's still a spectacular show, and I hope to really grow out this as a very bushy, very upright clump of California poppies. And you can see there's already pollinators, so there are certain insect species that just love California poppies. They're very showy flowers, so insects gravitate towards these blossoms first, and then they'll go to some of the other flowers in my front yard if they haven't gotten their fill. So for some species like the yellow-faced bumblebee, this is always their first choice. And then I don't even know what this is, but yeah, there's all sorts of native California bee species. And I used to just kind of lump them together in my mind visually and think of them as all being European honeybees, but I've seen quite a few. And then there's hoverflies, and that go to some of the other flowers, not these. And yeah, that's a very small bee species. And some are native solitary bees, and there's like bee wasps and bee flies and all sorts of things. Although I don't get as great of a variety here in suburbia as I've seen on some hiking trails. So yeah, this is an older flower. We're just enjoying the flowers here. And they're going to increase greatly in number shortly. So yeah, I've never had these things last for more than I don't know, 6-8 months. But I think last year, because I was growing in one of those pots, like the one you see on the right, the backup pot, and 3 smaller planters, I think they would just dry out in the summer months. So the plants just couldn't cope by August, and then everything died. But I've read that these can function as perennials. But I have yet to experience that, but I'd like to try. So that's one of my goals in the big cubic square planter with the water reservoir. I think if the root systems get deep enough and thick enough, then they can survive off that water reservoir with all the water and nutrients in there, and the summer heat won't be an issue. But in this pot, it won't last through summer. So yeah, I'll think about what I want to do with this pot. But yeah, for now it's just serving as some backup to have additional flowers, and then so that's why I just moved this pot right next to the cubic one. But the foliage here looks very healthy, and yeah, you should start to develop some seed pods pretty soon. So yeah, you can see they have that like little ruffled pink ring that eventually elongates the green part that's above it to become a seed pod. My new cell phone camera tends to make things a darker, deeper orange when I hold the lens up to these flowers to get a macro shot. But if I pull away and there's a lot of light background, light colored concrete slabs and the slats of the townhouse in the background that are sort of a tannish, a yellow, then the flowers themselves appear to be light yellow, very pale. But that's just artifacts of how the software processes the colors for the video on my phone. In reality, there's 3 sorts of varieties. I've seen flowers that are completely dark orange throughout, and then there's some that are indeed a pale yellow throughout, and then there are others that are sort of a hybrid with mesmerizing orange with yellow rims. And every flower that I've seen has 4 petals. I've seen no exceptions to this, and the structure tends to be pretty consistent, but there are a few phenotypic variations when it comes to the size, and even among the same plants, like different batches that come out at different times can be affected by how much you water and so on. So this blossom is the biggest I've had in 2024 in my memory. I've had others that may be comparable, but this one really stands out, and it reminds me of the first blossom of season 1. That one was one to remember, but it was a little bit too ruffled on the edges. And if you look at the foliage, you can still see there's some sickly dying leaves there, but otherwise, as a whole, it's getting healthier. So yeah, I don't seem to have as much of that problem of lack of turgor pressure like I did in earlier times in March and February when it was a little bit colder. And you can see the colors are just stunning here. This flower's actually getting a little bit old, I think, so it might be like day 3 or something like that. And here are some of the other blossoms. I never get sick of looking at California poppies, and I'm trying to grow some other California wildflowers, but they just can't really compare. So this is what it's like to pull off that little sheath. So it happens quite quickly. You know, if you're late by maybe half an hour to this, you might miss it. It might just shed on its own. So there's like no resistance when you pull these off. It kind of reminds me of the ends of onions. Yeah, this is one of those flowers that's more of a pale yellow, and then you can see there's a lot of buds coming on the way. So I don't know as of now how to control the size of the flowers or the number. And I started doing some experiments later on that you'll see in this video that I'll talk about to see if I can get more flower production, etc. I used to have boxes of Miracle Grow Bloom Booster, which is different in macronutrient composition than the all-purpose Miracle Grow plant food that I've been using, and which I bought a huge box of in bulk to get a cheaper price per ounce per pound. So so far I'd say yeah, these look like they could use a little bit of help. Some of these come out defective or have ruffled edges, and I'll show you the changes that I made later on in this video. But overall, I'm still very pleased with what I'm seeing here. You can see some of these new flower buds are coming in. They don't look very big though, but as the days go by, yeah, I mean, some flowers are small, as you can see, and some are large. I don't know if that's just, some of the plants are squished, crowded, they're underdeveloped, and that happens, or does it have anything to do with, fungal diseases that we've seen plaguing some of the leaves down there, the compound leaves? But it seems like just looking at the background here for this backup pot, it doesn't really seem to be the case yet. Yeah, some of these flowers aren't too big, so maybe I should buy some of that Miracle Grow Bloom Booster, and that'll help. And the other thing I was thinking about is, what if I pruned away all of those developing seed pods, because I imagine maybe a lot of energy goes into developing those. I don't know. They hang on there for quite the while on the peduncles, and so I'm thinking it takes that much time for the seeds to develop. Maybe it's a huge sink in terms of resources that could otherwise be going to producing more flowers if I cut those off early enough. So yeah, I mean, if they're going to be fully developed and have mature seeds inside, functional seeds, just a day or two later, then what's the point? But it seems like those seed pods take a long time to develop, far longer than the flowers. So my guess is that it just it's a resource sink for the plant. So if you have like 50 of those going on at the same time in this large square planter, then that could be a problem. There could be a dearth of flowers for a very long time, which is not what I want, because I already have a packet still with probably the better part of 10,000 seeds left in it. So I want continuous showy flowers. Maybe the Bloom Booster will get the job done. And as you can see, the plant is overgrown here, but yeah, I mean, everything's still upright at this point, which is very pleasant, but that's not the case later on in this video, as I'll show. So it's all uncharted territory past this point, because in the wild, in wild super blooms, I've seen the plants do kind of sprawl out in an unsightly fashion, and so they kind of fall outwards, these stalks, these main stems, in a circular fashion, and then the middle is a little bit bare. So you see that in the case of a lot of singular standalone plants on like sandy desert soil. So I tried using Epsom salt a long time ago. It's a bath salt, contains magnesium sulfate. So when you dissolve this, it releases magnesium and sulfate ions. So this is what I was alluding to earlier. So it's reported to help seeds germinate, make plants grow bushier and greener. And I don't have the inclination to go into all the exact biochemistry of why that is. But yeah, it's supposed to produce more flowers and enhance their color. Increase chlorophyll production, probably increases chloroplast production, and so on. And it also dehydrates pests because it's a salt, and helps balance soil pH and nutrients. So I forgot the exact reasoning. This helps with the uptake of certain macronutrients for the plant. But yeah, it's very straightforward. It's a salt that's not too messy. It's well, San Diego is on the drier side, but this is coastal, so the humidity can get high. But there's some minor clumping, but nothing like super unpleasant. The Miracle Grow all-purpose plant food crystals actually absorb water much more than what I just showed you, that bag of bath salts. So the instructions here, this is how I've been going about it, is 1 large scoop per 1.5 gallons, but this watering pail tends to hold 1.75. Like if you fill it until the 2-gallon mark at the top, it's way too full. So it's intended to be 1 big heaping spoon table from their custom spoon. And then this is 2 tablespoons per gallon. So if I'm doing 1.75 gallons, then I have to add 3.75 heaping tablespoons of this magnesium sulfate crystals. So the last spoon, I just go a little easier on it like that and try to approximate 75% of a spoon. So yeah, 1 heaping spoon. It's a little bit of under fertilization. Maybe in the future I could add a little bit more, but like a little bit more or less of the Miracle Grow won't hurt. And then I crush 2 multivitamins. This is not based on anything I measured out. It's just these tend not to dissolve very well in cold water, and I don't want to use warm water because warm water would shock the roots and cause some damage to dissolve them. And I don't have a lot of time as I'm preparing and ferrying several of these 1.75 gallon batches of fertilizer out there to fertilize my plants. So I just kind of swish it around while the water fills it up and hope for the best. So a lot of that calcium carbonate in the vitamin pills that goes undissolved, and it has sort of a waxy cellulose layer that they use to hold it all together. That doesn't dissolve very easily either. So yeah, that's my formula. So yeah, I have this new stock footage where I'm including the bath salt, the magnesium sulfate, every single time. And it seems like an awful lot of bath salt, but it seems to work really well for my other plants. It's worked really well so far in 2024. And I took a big risk, a big gamble by applying this same new condition to all my plants. But it's something that many plant growers swear by or have mentioned in the comments on my channel and in various videos in the past. So yeah, this thing is a little bit translucent. You can see where the water level is, where I just pointed. And it takes quite a while to fill this up with a faucet here. So you can imagine if I have 6 of those large giant square planters, I have 6 plant series minimum going on at any time, etc., then it just takes a long time, you know. So sometimes I'll just be doing stuff in my front yard and going in to the kitchen. I'll just like have the TV on, and you know, sometimes I'll take a rest, and it can take a long time, you know, half an hour to fertilize everything, and then sometimes I need additional water from the hose wand in my front yard to water the little side strips of dirt containing all the other plants that were here when I moved in. Like that plant in the top center that you see in the background. I don't even know what that is, but it has interesting flowers, and it's gotten a lot bigger, and I've sort of resuscitated it by taking care of it. So yeah, it's one of those things that's thriving under my care. But yeah, there's a rose bush that is not doing very well. That's off screen here, and then there's assorted like ground creeping flowers and other things that I don't really care about that much. Some of them have decent looking flowers, but the main show is always here with the California poppies, and everything else just kind of looks lackluster, to be honest, by comparison. So now there's a lot of foliage. It's you know, it's getting pretty tall, so I have to find places to decide to where I want to stick my nozzle of this watering can in, or I can just shower the foliage directly. I'm not too keen on showering the flowers themselves. straight up, but this is sort of what I've been doing as the plants turn into this big amalgam, like just one big bush, essentially. So this is 2024 April, day 136, and as you can see, there's a ton of seed pods. And the other issue is, as these things get too tall and too heavy, they just start falling over, and the seed pods are just adding weight. So everything is overgrown way past the point at which you would ever see in the wild. So in the wild, everything is functionally an annual, a little weedy flower that, the bushes, the plants, individuals stay on the smaller side unless you have one solo plant in a patch of well aerated sandy soil. Then during heavy rains, then you can get a plant that can resemble something like this, but it'll never get this tall. It just kind of creeps out in a ring and falls over. So these plants are actually not aesthetic when they're like super overgrown, as I'll be showing you over the next few minutes. But right now we have, it's still pretty good. You can see the foliage, all the new foliage looks very, very green and verdant and robust. And likewise in that pot, only 2 plants took off in that pot for whatever reason. There's like kind of a gap there where you could easily have a 3rd plant. But I figure even 1 plant growing big enough will just take over an entire pot. So I don't know what's the best formula for producing the maximum number and biggest flowers. Is it just 1 plant per giant pot, or is it having several to fill all the gaps so there's like just no space and everything looks really dense? So when you sow the seeds, the density is always too high and you're worried you're going to have hundreds of plants crowding each other out. But it seems like there's this invisible process of competition, and then after a few weeks you'll come out and examine your flower pot and find that there's only a few plants left. Like this backup pot only has 2 plants left, and you're just kind of wondering where the others went, and you can't really find evidence of the shriveled up seedlings from all the other developing plants. So yeah, this is very aesthetic. It's just way too many seed pods, so I'm gonna show you some pruning in a few minutes. But yeah, at this point it's all fairly aesthetic and well organized. But as the plants got even more overdeveloped, everything just started falling over to the side, and you can see already it's encroaching on my Joshua tree, which is not what I want, because some of these flowers will just impale themselves on the Joshua tree leaves, or it just looks like a huge mess after as time goes on. Like that flower is just poking up against those swords over there. So it's otherwise a beautiful flower that's not very accessible for large bumblebees. And down here you have some more, and you can clearly see the differences in color, although some of that also depends on what my cell phone decides to do for processing. You can see everything looks very light yellow at this angle. So this is day 141, and as I mentioned before, things will eventually get overgrown. So we saw this in season 1, and I didn't really have much of a response other than to just let it hang over, which is very unsightly. Everything's just too long, and you have new offshoots coming out way too far out on the stems. So there's just too much leverage, and after a while everything just collapses outwards in sort of a ring pattern, and you can see some of those stalks are pressing down on other stalks. So it's sort of a chain reaction, and everything's just overweight at this point. So I was initially just letting it go like this for a long time, But at some point, I decided to just start pruning away, and I also wanted to just cut away all those hundreds of seed pods. To I don't know if there's actually 100, but at least there were a few dozen here, because those are sucking up resources from all the plants to produce seeds, which takes a really long time. And you can see how many there are. It's just a lot of work, actually, if you decide to take this route. So it's all a learning process for me. It's season 2. I don't have a plot of land, wild land, in which I can grow tons and tons of these flowers, which would actually be my preference. So I hope someday, if I have a plot of land that's good enough in size, I could water would definitely be a problem, and that's not something I'd want to do manually for a very large area of land. So I'd have to run some lines underneath the ground and do drip irrigation, something like that. It also occurred to me to maybe build some, custom devices that can just condense atmospheric water and just let it all drip, the distilled water, onto the ground. I thought that would be a really cool idea. But then you'd have to have all these, machines basically producing all that water. So it'd be unaesthetic, depending on how you design them. But yeah, it's just some ideas floating around in my head. But yeah, you could see how many seed pods there are. So I've got a lot of work cut out for me, and you can see everything's falling over to the side, and they tend in general to fall more towards where the sun is, more south facing in this case, and the north face is blocked by the townhouse. So yeah, we still have a lot of flowers, but it's looking a little messy here. It's just crisscrossing jungle of stems, and things are starting to fall beneath the rim of this giant planter. So bees can still access these fine, but for the purpose of aesthetics and organization, it's starting to get out of hand. So I have to decide what to do pretty soon. But yeah, there's a huge number of blossoms, huge number of seed pods, even greater number of seed pods that I have to deal with. And I don't necessarily know what cutting away those seed pods will do, because it's not like I'm running a controlled experiment here. But yeah, you can see these are just falling onto the Joshua tree pot. So this is sort of what it looks like in the wild, except it's less symmetrical because there's crowding going on. But yeah, in the wild, for super blooms, 2019, 2023, you don't get the chance to see plants develop like this. So this is a clip from 2024 May, day 150. It's getting more and more overgrown, and it's just pouring out onto the concrete slabs at this point. So yeah, I have to take action at some point and start trimming and pruning. So I don't necessarily come out here every day to view the flowers up close and in person, although it is very beautiful. I don't always have the time, and not every day is well lit with direct sunlight. There were a lot of cloudy days in the first half of the year, and yeah, this is one of those scenes in which I was talking about earlier. It's like everything looks very washed out, and all the flowers look light yellow, but I can assure you it doesn't look like this in person. It looks much better. So you can see there's a lot of desiccated dead leaves, and just dead vegetation. You can see the stalks here are sort of broken from their own weight, and on the inside you can see some of that damage just caused by excessive weight. And in the wild, of course, that wouldn't happen because everything would just crawl along the ground, and I've seen a few plants that got to the overdeveloped stage and look like that. But for the most part, in super blooms, most of the plants are just a few inches high, maybe a foot. They're well before this stage, and they just are never able to reach this stage because there's not enough water. So even during super bloom years, it gets dry by April and even in March. So yeah, sometimes the super blooms are basically over by March. It's a sad thing, but even if it rains a lot, like the Southern Californian sun, it just is too much, and there's too much ground evaporation. When temperatures start to rise, then the super bloom just ends very abruptly. So you can see, yeah, some of these have gotten quite tall, but past a certain point, like everything is guaranteed to fall down. And if you follow my channel for all these years, you'll know that one of my biggest pet peeves is plants that can't support themselves. And this seems to be a particular problem of garden plants. It's not necessarily like all ascribed to being the weakness of the species. It's just when I use a lot of rich fertilizer, like the leaves tend to be overgrown. It's hard to see in this case, but with a lot of my other fruit trees, the leaves are like world record big, and then that just weighs everything down. And yeah, everything just tends to bend over unless it's a species that just has a very, very solid, thick trunk. So you can see this is already starting to fall over some of this beautiful new growth, which sucks. And for this pot, it's looking a little ratty. So I'm going to do some work here and prune everything up and see what that does. But yeah, it's hard to maintain like perfect aesthetics with California poppies for all these months because well, number one, I'm not very experienced with this, and number two, it's just like the flowers keep coming in waves. And then yeah, there's going to be a lot of seed pods, and then if you don't like cut everything away and all the unkempt stuff, you might have some phases in which there's just not that many flowers. But usually if you prune away everything, then it seems to like trigger some renewal of growth. So that's an assassin bug, and see me get rid of it in a second. So I think it's just waiting for bees. So naturally there's a lot of pollinators, and then that assassin bug just came out of nowhere, and it's looking for regular meals. So I don't want it to harm the bumblebees. So in either case, I would just be getting rid of that. I would just like flush it away with the water, the hose, or do something else. But yeah, you can see this is very unkempt, very unsightly. So I'm going to prune everything away. And what is that, like a bee or something? Very different species than some of the other honeybees. So yeah, it's an assassin bug. I get a better shot up here, higher resolution, more detail. So yeah, it's an interesting species. I've never seen anything like that. But whenever you see me spraying like this with this backpack sprayer that's battery powered, it's I'm using the Bayer's Bio Advanced 3-in-1, and that gets rid of mites, gets rid of disease of various kinds, and all sorts of pests. So it's a pretty much an all-purpose product, and yeah, it's been a staple for me for the last few years to use this backpack sprayer. It's really fun to use actually, and the battery lasts for a very long time. So it has this very fun to use like hose wand that sprays a very fine mist. So this is all I use it for. In the previous apartment before I came here, yeah, I used it to water and wash the plant leaves sometimes. But yeah, for current purposes, it's the perfect tool for applying pesticide. But little else, because I just can't get that volume of water that I need to feed all my plants. Yeah, so I was just shooing away a honeybee of some sort, or maybe it was a native bee, because I don't want it to get poisoned. But it's kind of hard to avoid because they're coming here to feed all the time. So it's May 2024, day 161. It's time to do some of that pruning that I've been talking about. So yeah, I wanted to see if any of this stuff would right itself, and it just became more and more of a mess. So you can see right there, I cut through one of the seed pods, cut through the seeds cleanly. They're pretty much fixed in place in kind of like a wet gel in there. And yeah, this is very cathartic because it's just like long overdue for a haircut basically. And I accidentally cut this away, although this flower is on its last legs. So yeah, there's going to be some mistakes and sacrifices here, but I'm tired of this just sprawling out all over the place like a bunch of vines. So it's kind of annoying. And you can see there's a lot of dead foliage or unhealthy foliage, but you could also see in the center, in the top center, you can see new greenery coming out. So yeah, I lost a few flowers. This is a young flower. And on this side, it's just a total jungle too. So yeah, my thought process here was that if I cut away and leave a lot of those thick dead stalks or non-functional stalks flanking where the plant is growing out from for each plant, then hopefully the new growth that comes out on top will grow straight up and be buttressed on all sides by a lot of dead stalks. And I decided to sack this because yeah, I mean, it doesn't look that healthy, and you know, I think I have enough flowers, enough of a poppy supply coming out of that square planter where conditions are much better. So in these you know, sort of conical planters, you can see the root development, it's fine, but it's not overly developed either. I mean, these are pretty shallow, underdeveloped roots relative to the shoot system, which is usually not a good sign. I mean, they have a little bit of that you know, reddish tint to them, sort of like the Joshua tree roots, which I interpret as a sign of vitality and health. But yeah, you can see how many stalks came up on top. It's almost like a vegetable of some sort, you know, like a celery maybe. So yeah, that's what the root system looks like. There are no apparent rhizomes, and I'm going to yank out this other plant. So it's like I was saying, only 2 plants really made it in this pot, and then there's a whole bunch of these annoying weeds. I don't even know what they are. You can see some of them here, and they're just sort of ground creepers that really like my front patio environment. So yeah, these roots look a little lighter, but they seem to go deeper. So yeah, that's just what the root system of the California poppy looks like. And here I am getting rid of all these weeds, although I'm sure the cocoa coir in this pot is saturated with all sorts of weed seeds and more California poppy seeds that if the conditions are right, they'll germinate as well. So yeah, I'm giving the rest of this a good trimming to you know, get everything back in order again. And the hope is that after this trimming, you have a lot of material that you can see, especially on the right side, where it'll buttress anything growing hopefully straight up in the future. So if you look at the ground, there's seeds littering the ground all over. So I don't know how viable these seeds are just baking on this concrete. I don't know if that kind of temperature exposure has any effect on the seeds, but I've got enough California poppies and seeds as is. So later on, I just use the hose wand and just wash these to the sides and whatever cracks inside the concrete. So they'll go all over the place if they can germinate in random spots and generate flowers. I'd be happy, but not really counting on it. So this is what the other side looks like. It's kind of a mess, but you can see some new growth coming out there in the middle. It's more verdant in the center, so that's nice. There's new growth coming out. The bees are going to have to do without because I lost a lot of flowers here, and it's in between one of those cycles of flowers in which there's new growth coming out, but there's just not a lot of flowers simultaneously. So yeah, I mean, there's still some blooms here, and you can see some flower buds, but I expect a lot more flower buds to pop up due to having trimmed away all of those seed pods that were just soaking up energy from all these plants. So that's the plan, and I could cut this stuff that's pouring over, but then I'd lose too many flower buds and have almost nothing left. All right, so it's day 172. It's still May 2024, and there's that classical music piece, Flight of the Bumblebee, that I like. And this is another yellow-faced bumblebee. It's one of the prettiest bees I've ever seen. I encountered one of these a long time ago. And I think I mentioned this in the season 1 finale, where it was just in a dark hallway late in the afternoon, and I put a postcard or a piece of hard paper in front of it, and it crawled on top. I thought it was on its last legs, but I took it over through my apartment to the sun on my balcony, and then it just immediately took off and started navigating away. So I can't say for sure because I didn't take a picture. It all happened so fast, but I'm fairly certain it was the yellow-faced bumblebee. So there are 4 other species, but I looked at the pictures of them, and this is the best looking one. So yeah, she's a beauty. She's flying all over the place, and their flight noise can be a little bit intimidating, but these are considered to be slow and docile bees. So I'm getting quite close here. This current phone that I have, it doesn't have that much. Well, I mean, yeah, I could zoom, but then the video quality would decrease. So and typically I don't know when these bees are going to show up. I don't even know if it's the same bee or different bees from the same colony or whatnot. But these are social insects. They're not solitary bees. We do have a lot of solitary bees in San Diego, in California. So they might be somewhere around here. I think they are coming usually within a 500-meter radius, or more typically they'll fly like a 250-meter radius. So somewhere within this neighborhood. And they tend to be ground dwelling, I believe, although they can make nests elsewhere. So while that bee is busy, I'm just going to do some additional trimming. And the bees have never shown aggression. There's many different species, but certainly the yellow-faced bumblebees are more intimidating because of that bomber noise that they make, buzzing around. It's really loud, actually. So yeah, I got some good shots, and as I mentioned, because there's so many poppies in these scenes, everything turns dark, and then there's more of an orange hue. So some of these bees are so big that they drag all the flowers down like that. So they actually have a very tough time maneuvering and getting into the flowers. They have to do a lot of work. Whereas yeah, like that smaller bee that you just saw, it doesn't bend the flowers. It only weighs a fraction of what this bumblebee does. And if memory serves, I read about these bees that I think even the queen can go exploring and foraging. But yeah, all castes, the soldiers, the drones, they can go looking for food, whereas your typical honeybee colony, they have castes and they don't do stuff like that. So they have very specific roles. And this is some slow motion footage of what I just showed you. So you can see this giant yellow-faced bumblebee dragging an entire flower down with it. So yeah, I've seen a small one too. So I don't know if they're all from the same colony, but the small ones are definitely much younger. And these bees, I think they come out in spring and summer. They're known as summer bees. And yeah, so this is towards the end of May. And I guess they'll be visiting for a few more months. So they've definitely marked this pot is part of their territory, and I have seen them on other flowers. I have all sorts of flowers in my front yard. A lot of them were left from the previous tenant. So yeah, it's a beautiful bee, and I've seen two at a time at most, but they love the California poppies, and they will visit some of the other flowers. But yeah, I have this other pot that's a series in progress, but it's based on a seed packet that I bought online that contains I think 19 different species of California wildflowers, and there's just one tiny little poppy flower in that very crowded pot, and this bee paid that little poppy a visit as well, so it has a huge preference for poppies over all other flowers. So yeah, typically poppies would be very, very limited in nature temporally in terms of like for how long they're available. So they must really like the taste of the pollen and the nectar. So thanks for watching, and please stay tuned for further updates.